Hey, it's Webs here, and it's time for war with a very much horde-themed deck, Drek'thar Enraged Warrior. So, I was trying to figure out how to abuse Drek'thar in Warrior. I know the most common way to do it is to use Rush. However, there is a mechanic that is kinda a pseudo warrior mechanic at this point because they have removed the actual keyword for the mechanic, Enrage, that you can easily abuse through the cards of Fervoring Berserker and Bone Chewer Brawler, because you can get multiple of these really high impact minions out of your deck at the same time. Usually your opponent doesn't have any way to respond with it in the current metagame, and thus you'll usually win the game just through that. So for the Mulligan guide, you want to keep Warsong Envoy in your opening hand always. It is a really good one-drop minion to actually have. Most of the time it's going to be the same stat line as Initiate, but it does have the potential of being even bigger because sometimes your opponent's just not going to attack into it and trigger its frenzy right away, thus allowing you to actually set it up to being bigger than a 3-2. Bone Chewer Brawler is also a good card to keep in your opening hand as it lets you have a really good turn 2 play and does take some of the resources away from your opponent for your Fervoring Berserkers if you do have these in your opening hand, which gets me to Fervoring Berserker, another great target to keep in your opening hand, though sometimes you don't want to keep this. It just depends on the matchup. If you're in a more aggro based matchup where there's going to be a bunch of minions back and forth, this might not be the best card to choose over something like a Bladestorm or a Minefield. But if you can have a perfect curve of Warsong Envoy into a Bone Chewer into a Fervoring Berserker, you usually just win the game at that point. Your opponent's not going to have much to be able to deal with it. If you are in a minion based matchup, cards like Bladestorm and Man the Cannons are really good to keep in your opening hand just so you can get rid of some of the early game minions, along with Sword and Board, which allows you to get rid of any 2 HP minion. And finally, the last card that you'd want to keep in your opening hand is Drek'thar, just because this allows you to have a huge turn 4 or 3 play, depending if you're going first or second. And for cards that you don't want to keep in your opening hand, you usually don't want to keep Cutting Class or Shield of the Honored in your opening hand. These two cards usually are just dead. Injured Blademaster is also another card in the deck that you don't want to keep in your hand, just because of the fact that I'd rather pull this off of Drek'thar, and that's the entire reason why it's actually in the deck. Getting a 4/7 off of Drek'thar is insane and allows you to actually have a very sticky minion even though you're limiting yourself to 3 or lower cost minions. Now with that being said, let's get into some games. Alright, time for a game against Warlock. This hand actually is not that good. Gonna actually mulligan everything away. The Cargo Guard, there's an argument for, but And this hand is even worse, though that makes it a lot better. So they're Mill, Warlock. Oh shit, this was before I took out the bulk up. I realized I had bulk up in the deck for some weird reason, and it didn't come up in this game, but it existed in the deck. I think this was like game 2. Just going to Hero Power. Alright, so we have a few options here. We can just play our weapon, and the next turn be able to draw a bunch. Or we can play the Envoy here, and just Hero Power. Just gonna play the weapon, I guess. We're gonna coin out something. Deck of Chaos. That's a literal card that I always forget about. I don't think it matters too much here, but it could, I guess. Let's draw 2. Cargo Guard. Berserker. The Berserker's good. Cargo Guard's good for right now. Envoy. Everything's shaping up here. We just need a taunt. Trying to figure out what I actually want to do here or not. Though I think I'm going to use the Cruel Taskmaster to actually kill it instead. I really wanted to use the Man the Cannons, however that would have put a lot of things into AoE range, so I didn't want to do that in the end. We actually might just win here. They had no big threat that they could have played off of Deck of Chaos. Deck of Chaos is very flawed if you think about it, just because of the fact that if you use Deck of Chaos, the cards in your hand still have the high-end cost. I'm going to use Man the Cannons, attack once, then use Bladestorm, buff up the Fervoring Berserker to 18-2. Alright, time for a game against Warrior. Probably going to be questline, I had to guess. Getting rid of the injured Blade Master. Trying to a Shield of Honor, which is Going to play the Envoy. Shiver me timbers or shiver their timbers is the only thing that they could do that would actually kill that, so I'm not too worried. They are questline. It isn't a big shock. Blizzard didn't nerf stupid questline. Oh, drawing into Drek'thar though is really good. Harbor Scamp. A Brawler's good too. Are we just actually going to out-tempo them here? Out-tempo the probably one of the best decks in the entire metagame? Okay, so they are going to kill the Brawler, which is kind of sad, but we do have Drek'thar, which gets us 2 Berserkers. Here, my Berserker Rage. The least you could do is stick around. Alright, time for a game against Hunter. Going to keep the Blade Storm just because it's Hunter. Warsong Envoy, pretty good. Man the Cannon's alright too, actually. A second Envoy. Okay, so we should be able to do some stuff here. Interesting. That doesn't actually kill that unit, but we do get a 3-2, which is actually pretty good. Better than what he has. What type of weird Hunter deck runs those cards? Well, I could kill everything here, which I'm going to do. Or I had the choice to play a Envoy plus a little Taskmaster, I guess. Fervoring Berserker, great top deck against Hunter. I think they have one answer to Fervoring Berserker. Well, technically 2 with Deadly Shot. But what are the chances that they're going to be running Deadly Shot, right? Right? Or Song Wrangler. Okay, so there's something that we can do next turn that sounds awful on paper, but is actually probably pretty good. Gonna trigger the Envoy, which makes it a 7-2, and then we kill or 1, we get a 8-3 and a 7-1, and then we just go face. And if everything survives, or just one thing survives, we win the game. A taunt is actually pretty good. Huh. Oh, they just give up. Okay. I guess that secret wasn't anything that could have stopped it. Alright, time for a game against Paladin. This hand is not looking good. Going to keep 1 sword and board though, just so we have some way to deal with anything they place down early. An Envoy is really good. Going to play a Cruel Taskmaster. Get a 4-2. Going to play the Berserker, attacking to the 1-1. Go face. They're going to buff up their Divine Shield. Well, the good news for us is we can actually kill it this turn. And then just go face. And they give up, I guess. Alright, now that we're through some games, let's discuss how well the deck did and why I built the deck the way I did. So this deck actually performed incredibly well, which is a shock to me. Originally, I had tried out a bunch of different tactics within the deck. At one point, I had actually tried a taunt package, which can actually be seen in the first game of this video, where I still had bulk up, but those cards actually made you brick when you were running a low amount of taunt minions in the actual deck, and I ended up cutting them just to make it more consistent. I also tried rush minions in the deck just because that type of warrior has a lot of draw power that you can actually access, but then again, some of those minions are above Drek'thar's, thus turning Drek'thar actually offline, unless you wanted to play a risky game where he might be online or he might not be online, and I didn't want to do that. So in the end, I ended up going with a full Enraged package. This allowed me to focus on one mechanic and thus help the consistency factor of the deck a lot. I also included a bunch of like control cards just because I realized after testing the Paladin Drek'thar deck that there are two ways to make Drek'thar actually function in a deck. The first is to be able to actually cheat out bigger minions by either discovering them or having a spell that spawns them. And the second way is by giving yourself a bunch of control tools, thus limiting your opponent on how big they can actually go with their board, and sometimes actually be able to deal with their big minion-based boards if they're playing a bunch of minions, and allowing you to actually survive until you get a Drek'thar or some other combo out of the deck. And the cool thing about this deck in particular is it's not really getting any support with the new set that I can think of off the top of my head. So it was a safe deck to actually do now because I didn't want to have to redo a Drek'thar warrior deck in like a week or two. And if you've been looking for some type of warrior deck to get you over the last week or so we have with the set, this might be the deck for you. It had a 42% win rate across 18 games, which is actually not that bad. It's not the best deck in the world, don't get me wrong, but if you're a warrior fan and questline warrior is very boring to you at this point, it's actually a decent enough deck for you to actually try out, and I actually kind of recommend it. It's actually pretty fun. It uses some cards long forgotten by the metagame, and all it requires is you to have Drek'thar, which you might not have, but if you chose Vander, you have a lot more fun decks that you can actually play. I just don't have access to them. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, bye bye.